I'll start with a few simple but maybe obvious statements. I also like the opportunity to dress up. And for those of you that have any doubt, I am not the genius behind BlackRock. So what I could probably top a couple of the fun stories that you just heard from Mr. Allaire. I would love to talk about a lot of things, but with all this low-hanging fruit from the business community in this room, we're going to focus, of course, on FIRST. I think it's somewhat of a cruel hoax that you would pick this year. I'm sure that your honorees every year are giants, and they represent some of the real legends of business. But this year, the largest consumer products company, Procter & Gamble, the world's largest medical products company, J&J. It's brutally obvious. I am the mascot, and happy to be so. I do feel like it's old home week, though, because I've gotten to know a lot of the people and a lot of the companies that are represented here. I certainly don't have enough time to recognize all of them. But FIRST is a magnet for quality people and quality companies. And I can also tell you, again, Xerox, for instance, and J&J. You know, you've heard the story about the gift that keeps on giving. So not only did we somehow get Mr. Allaire, while he was doing little things like running Xerox and the Council on Competitiveness, and the Business Round, all that stuff, to first become one of the 23 founding companies that got FIRST off the ground, but to become our first chairman. But he later retired from Xerox. There's no small print, there's no print anywhere by which anybody really good has ever retired from FIRST and lived. And so he stayed on as our chairman for a while. And then Ursula Burns, who you've heard about, who is an engineering intern in her early days, who has become the chairman and CEO of Xerox. She is also now on the board of directors of FIRST. So that gift keeps on giving, and she's spectacular. Oh, by the way, Johnson & Johnson, Jim Utaski is here. He became the second chairman of FIRST, and he retired from J&J. Remember, there's no small print at FIRST. When they retire, they just have more time for us. He's still the vice chairman of FIRST. And Sherry McCoy, who's here today, a very senior executive at J&J, the only other woman that is now also on the board of FIRST. You saw what happened to Ursula? Anyway, we'll see what happens. Bill left. I really wish I could go through all the connections. I think I need to focus on Mr. Rohr. He talked about the fact that if there's anything that really should be worrying everybody in this room, it's what's going to happen to the next generation. I know that this country is really fixated lately on the crisis du jour. Healthcare this year, the banks last year, there's always some crisis. 20 years ago, what really started to make me concerned was the fundamental fact that here we are, the richest, most technically advanced country in the world, and as he told you, starting at kindergarten but getting worse every year, that divergence every year. Even 20 years ago, we were starting to show the scary signs of falling behind virtually every industrialized country in the world, particularly in science and technology. I don't understand politics. I don't understand economics. Over the last 20 years, I'm come to learn that politicians don't understand politics, and economists certainly don't understand economics. I don't want to understand that stuff. I don't want to play the blame game of who got us into this mess. It doesn't really matter. I don't know how we got here, but I know one thing for sure. If we don't quickly start generating the smartest, most well-educated, most focused, most capable, most entrepreneurial, most willing to take a risk generation this country has ever seen, it's pretty unlikely that we're going to stay ahead of the crisis du jour. We're going to lose. I think we're in a race between all of these catastrophes and education. And I think we have to make sure education wins that race. I think, again, the business of America has always been business. Politics has been a sideshow and a relatively small piece of this country for a long time. 20 years ago, when it suddenly hit me that it can't possibly be the education system that we can all blame and play the blame game, what's happening, it seemed pretty obvious that in a culture that gets what it celebrates, even 20 years ago, every year, the Super Bowl was becoming a bigger and bigger event. It still is bigger and bigger every year. Every role model that every kid could look up to, particularly the inner city kids and the women and minorities, came from one of two places, Hollywood or the NBA. It seemed to me suddenly quite obvious what we got to do. Change the culture of the United States. We got to get back to a simple, maybe it was too simple, observation. It wasn't government that created our wealth. They didn't, Edison wasn't a politician. The Wright brothers weren't economists or bankers. There was a time when this country created real wealth. It was the envy of the world. It was the intersection of a lot of things, but mostly it was hardworking, smart, innovative people. Innovation is what it's about. Every global issue that's out there now is going to be solved by major innovations. And the flip side of that is without major innovations, we're not going to sustain an environment with 6 billion people that all want things. We need innovation in healthcare, we need it in energy, we need it in virtually everything. And 20 years ago, it seemed to me, while we were all playing the blame game, it's the teachers, it's whatever it is, where were the role models that would fundamentally capture the minds and hearts of enough of our kids, hopefully all of our kids, so that they'd work hard at something that mattered, so that by the time they get to that 5th grade, they not only haven't dropped away, but they've become the next generation that really would live the American dream. Especially now with the rest of the world screaming towards 100% literacy, literally in some developing countries, 100% literacy, including in English. How do you do that in a culture where you get what you celebrate? You celebrate science and technology. How do you do that? You put Shaquille O'Neal of science and technology in front of kids. Where do you find them? At Xerox, at the other major companies in the country that live and breathe technology, that needed to survive, that needed to create the quality of life that we all take for granted. So back then I did ask 23 companies. Remember, I'm an inventor. That means I look at the same problem everybody else looks at, but see it differently. And I went to 23 technology companies, of which, of course, J&J, Xerox are among them, and said, let's steal the model of sports in every way we possibly can, because it's such a powerful model in this country. Pick a high school sport, it's 6-8 weeks long, it starts with this, it ends with a double elimination tournament, you bring the school bands, you bring the cheerleaders, you don't give them grades, you give them incentives. Remember, teachers, they're those judgmental people. As coaches, those nurturing people. We justify sports because it's so important they learn teamwork. Then why, when they do it in the classroom, do you call it cheating? I mean, everything about sports seemed to me like, of course kids are going to want to do this. The trouble is not that many of them are going to make a living, bounce, 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 throw. They need other skills.